Mirai stood at the edge of the sacred river with her feet in the mud. The water was dark and still. She could see her reflection looking back at her, broken by small ripples. Behind her, the entire Blue Spine tribe watched in silence. She knew what was coming. Everyone knew. The morning had started like all the others before a judgment. The tribal mothers had painted her skin with white clay. They had braided her hair with death flowers. They had sung the old songs while Mirai sat perfectly still, not speaking, not crying. What good would crying do? The judgment of teeth had been the law for hundreds of years. No amount of tears could change that. Elder Daishim stood 3 steps behind her. He was old, his skin covered in the blue markings that showed his power. His mind voice was the strongest in the tribe. When he spoke inside everyone's head, it felt like thunder, but Mirai barely heard it. Her psychic gland was malformed, broken. She could sense emotions sometimes, like shadows at the edge of her vision, but she could not speak mind to mind. She could not join the great collective consciousness that bound the tribe together. She was useless, a burden. That was what the old laws said. "Mirai of the Blue Spine," Daishim's voice rumbled in her mind, weak and distant like a storm far away. "You have lived 17 cycles. You have taken food from our stores. You have drunk from our water. You have been given shelter and protection. But you cannot give back to the tribe. You cannot join our thoughts. You cannot share our strength." Mirai said nothing. Her voice would not reach them anyway. They could not hear thoughts that were not sent through the mind. "The law is clear," Daishim continued. "Those who cannot contribute must face the judgment of teeth. If the gods favor you, you will survive. If not, your spirit will feed the river, and the tribe will be stronger for it." Mirai glanced to her left. Her brother Hyunwoo stood with the other young hunters. His face was hard, expressionless, but she could feel his pain. It leaked from his mind like blood from a wound. He had argued against this. He had begged the elders to give her more time. But the law was the law. She wanted to tell him it was okay. She wanted to tell him she understood. But she could not reach his mind, and speaking out loud during the judgment was forbidden. The river stirred. Something large moved beneath the surface. Mirai's heart began to pound. She had seen Kreshmar before. Everyone had. They were the apex predators of Verath 7, massive crocodilian beasts with armored scales and jaws that could crush stone. The tribe worshipped them as holy creatures, messengers of the gods. To be killed by a Kreshmar was considered a sacred death. Mirai did not feel very sacred. She felt terrified. "Enter the water," Daishim commanded. Mirai took 1 step forward, then another. The water was warm around her ankles, then her knees. The bottom of the river was soft and sticky. Her feet sank into the mud with each step. She could feel the attention of the entire tribe pressing against her back. 200 minds, all focused on her, all waiting to see if she would live or die. The water reached her waist. She stopped walking. This was far enough. This was where the judgment happened. The river rippled again, closer this time. Mirai closed her eyes. She tried to calm her breathing. Maybe it would be quick. Maybe it would not hurt too much. Maybe... A massive shape surged up from the depths. The Kreshmar was enormous. Its body was as long as 4 men lying end to end. Its scales were dark green and thick as armor plates. Its eyes were yellow and cold. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth like daggers. Mirai could not move. Terror locked her muscles in place. She could only stare as death rose before her. The creature lunged forward, jaws wide, and then something impossible happened. A figure burst from the jungle on the far bank. It was small and strange, covered in a mottled green covering that shimmered and fell away as it ran. The figure sprinted toward the water with a speed that seemed reckless, suicidal. The tribe gasped. Minds flickered with confusion and shock. Who was this? What was this? The stranger dove into the river without hesitation. It swam with powerful strokes, closing the distance in seconds. And just as the Kreshimar's jaws were about to close on Mirai, the stranger launched itself out of the water and landed on the creature's back. Mirai stumbled backward, falling into the shallows. She watched with wide eyes as the stranger, no, she could see now it was female, clung to the thrashing Kreshmar with one hand. In her other hand was a small device that hummed and glowed with blue light. The stranger drove the device down between the Kreshmar's scales. The creature roared. It was a sound that shook the air and made the water tremble. It rolled and twisted, trying to throw the stranger off. But the female held on with impossible strength. She pulled the device free and stabbed again and again. Black blood poured into the water. The Kreshmar thrashed more violently. Its tail whipped around, creating huge waves. The stranger was thrown clear, splashing into the water several meters away, but she surfaced immediately, gasping for air, and swam back toward the creature. The Kreshmar turned to face her. Its yellow eyes burned with rage. It opened its mouth and lunged. The stranger dove under the water. The jaws snapped shut on empty air. A moment later, the stranger surfaced directly beneath the creature's head. She thrust the glowing device upward with both hands, driving it into the soft flesh under the Kreshmar's jaw. The creature jerked once, twice, then it went still. Its massive body began to sink. The stranger grabbed Mirai's arm. Her grip was strong and warm. She pulled Mirai toward the shore, half dragging, half swimming. They collapsed together on the muddy bank, both gasping for air. Mirai stared at the stranger. She was unlike anyone Mirai had ever seen. Her skin was tan and smooth, without any scales or markings. Her hair was black and short. Her eyes were dark and bright at the same time. She wore strange clothing that clung to her body, covered in pockets and tools. But the strangest thing was her mind. Mirai could barely sense it. It was loud and chaotic, full of wild emotions and racing thoughts, but it did not speak in the clear mind voice of the Velnari. It was something different, something alien. The stranger looked at Mirai and spoke. The sounds were harsh and strange, nothing like the elegant telepathic communication of the tribe. "Are you okay?" the stranger said in a language Mirai did not understand. "Can you hear me?" Mirai just stared. Behind them, Elder Daisham approached. His mind voice boomed with anger and confusion. The entire tribe was in chaos. Some were frightened, some were angry, some were simply shocked. The judgment had been broken. An outsider had interfered with sacred law. The Kreshmar, a holy messenger, had been killed. The stranger stood up slowly. She looked at the assembled tribe with wary eyes. Her hand moved to another device on her belt. Mirai realized something then, something that cut through her fear and confusion. This stranger had jumped into the river. She had attacked a Kreshmar. She had risked her life. For Mirai. For someone she did not even know. The stranger had saved her life. But as Elder Daisham's mind voice grew louder and more threatening, as the warriors of the tribe began to move forward with their weapons raised, Mirai wondered if that salvation would last beyond the next few minutes. The stranger had saved Mirai from the judgment of Teeth. But who would save the stranger from the judgment of the tribe? Lieutenant Jiwan Park had not planned to violate every first contact protocol in existence today. But then again, she had not planned to watch someone get fed to a giant crocodile either. She stood dripping wet on the riverbank, facing down an entire alien tribe, and wondered if her career was the least of her problems right now. The device in her hand was a geological sampling tool, not a weapon. It was designed to core through rock, not pierce the hide of apex predators. But it had worked. Barely. The old alien at the front of the group was clearly the leader. His skin was covered in blue patterns that seemed to glow faintly. He was tall and thin, like all of his species, with long limbs and a narrow face. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Instead, Ji-won felt a pressure against her mind, like someone knocking on a door that did not exist. They were telepathic. The mission briefings had theorized as much from the behavioral observations, but this was confirmation. Unfortunately, Ji-won was about as telepathic as a brick. "I don't suppose any of you speak standard," Ji-won said, knowing the answer already. She had been observing this tribe for 3 weeks from a hidden camp 2 kilometers away. They had no technology beyond stone tools and woven cloth. They had never seen a human before. The pressure against her mind increased. It was not painful exactly, but it was uncomfortable, like someone shouting at you when you were wearing earplugs. The young woman Ji-won had pulled from the river stepped forward. She was shaking, her white clay paint running in streaks down her arms. She looked at Ji-won, then at the old leader, then back at Ji-won. The young woman pointed at her own head, then at Ji-won's head, then shook her head slowly. Ji-won understood. "You cannot hear them. They cannot hear you." "Yeah, I got that part," Ji-won said. "But I can't just let them kill you. I'm sorry, but that's not how we do things where I come from." The young woman tilted her head. She did not understand the words, but maybe she understood the tone. More aliens were gathering now. 20, 30, maybe 40 of them. Some carried spears with stone points, others held bows. They formed a semicircle around Ji-won and the young woman. Ji-won kept her hand near her sidearm, though she really did not want to use it. Shooting a bunch of pre-industrial aliens would definitely end her career, and possibly start a war. One of the younger males pushed through the crowd. He looked like the young woman. Same facial structure, same body type. Siblings, maybe. He was carrying a spear, but he held it low, not in a threatening position. He stopped in front of the old leader and his mouth moved. The old leader's expression did not change, but something shifted in the air. A sense of tension. The young male knelt beside the woman Ji-won had saved. He touched her shoulder gently, then looked up at Ji-won. His eyes were strange, large and dark, with golden flecks. But there was something in them that was universal. Gratitude. Ji-won nodded at him. He nodded back. The old leader made a sharp gesture. 2 warriors stepped forward and grabbed the young woman's arms. She did not resist. They began to pull her away from the river, toward the cluster of dome-shaped buildings that made up the village. "Hey!" Ji-won moved forward. "Where are you taking her?" The warriors stopped. The old leader held up one hand. He pointed at Ji-won, then at the young woman, then at the village. The message was clear. You too. Ji-won weighed her options. She could run. Her combat training and augmented physiology meant she could probably outpace them through the jungle. She could make it back to her camp, call for extraction, and be off this planet in 6 hours. But that would mean abandoning the young woman. And Ji-won had not jumped on the back of a dinosaur just to leave the job half-finished. "Fine," Ji-won said. "Lead the way." They walked through the village in a procession. The aliens kept their distance from Ji-won, like she was diseased or dangerous. Children peeked out from doorways and were quickly pulled back inside. The buildings were made of mud and woven reeds, simple but sturdy. The streets were dirt paths, well-worn and clean. They stopped at a larger building near the center of the village. It was circular, with a high-domed roof and open sides. Inside, a ring of flat stones formed a council circle. The old leader gestured for Ji-won to sit. She did, keeping her back straight and her hands visible. The young woman was made to sit beside her. The brother sat on her other side. The rest of the tribe gathered around the outside of the building, watching with hungry eyes. The old leader sat across from them. He placed his hands on his knees and closed his eyes. The pressure on Ji-won's mind increased again, more focused this time. It felt like someone was trying to read a book through a closed door. Ji-won looked at the young woman. "I don't suppose you can translate?" The woman stared at her blankly. Jiwon pointed at the old leader, then at her own head, then at the young woman's head. "Can you hear him? Can you tell me what he's saying?" The young woman's eyes widened slightly. She understood the question. She pointed at her own head and made a weak gesture like water dripping through fingers. Little, not much. Great. A telepathic species with one member who barely had telepathy. That was just Jiwon's luck. The old leader opened his eyes. He spoke, his mouth forming words that sounded like wind through leaves, soft and sibilant. The young woman listened, her face tense with concentration. After a long moment, she turned to Jiwon. She held up her hands and began to gesture. It was crude sign language, improvised on the spot, but Jiwon caught the meaning. "Who are you? Where from? Why interfere?" Jiwon took a breath. "How did you explain Earth to someone who had never left their planet? How did you explain humanity to someone who thought in a completely different way?" She pointed at the sky. "I come from up there, very far away, a place called Earth." She pointed at herself. "Human. My name is Jiwon." The young woman tried to repeat the word. "Jiwon." It came out soft and uncertain, but close enough. Jiwon nodded. "Yes, Jiwon." She pointed at the young woman. "What's your name?" The woman pointed at herself. "Mirai. Mirai," Jiwon repeated. "Okay, good. We're getting somewhere." Mirai turned to the old leader and tried to relay the information through gestures and facial expressions. It was painfully slow. The old leader's expression grew more confused and frustrated with each passing moment. Finally, he held up a hand to stop her. He pointed at Jiwon and made a gesture like pushing something away. The meaning was clear enough. "You do not belong here." Jiwon pointed at Mirai, then at the river. She made a gesture like jaws snapping shut. Then she pointed at herself and made a stopping gesture. I stopped what was happening. The old leader's expression darkened. He spoke, and this time his tone needed no translation. It was angry. Mirai tried to relay the message through gestures, sacred law, old tradition. You broke it. Jiwon met the old leader's eyes. "Yeah, I broke it, and I'd do it again." She knew he could not understand the words, but maybe he could understand the tone, the defiance. The old leader stood. He spoke at length, his voice rising and falling. The gathered tribe murmured in response. Jiwon caught some of the gestures Mirai made in response. Outsider, demon, violation, punishment. This was not going well. Then the brother, Hyunwoo, Jiwon would learn later, stood up. He spoke, his voice quieter but firm. The old leader turned to him, surprised. They had a back-and-forth exchange that grew heated. Other members of the tribe began to speak up, some supporting Hyunwoo, others shouting him down. Jiwon watched the debate unfold. She did not need telepathy to recognize an argument when she saw one. Hyunwoo was defending her, or maybe defending his sister. Either way, he was taking a risk. Finally, the old leader raised both hands. Silence fell immediately. He looked at Jiwon for a long moment, then at Mirai, then back at Jiwon. He spoke again, slower this time. Mirai turned to Jiwon and gestured carefully. "You saved her, now responsible. She fails, you punished. She succeeds, you honored." Jiwon blinked. "Wait, what? I'm responsible for her?" Mirai nodded. "For how long?" Mirai gestured broadly. "Until proved useful. Until tribe accepts." "And if she's not useful?" Mirai drew a finger across her throat. "Both of us?" Mirai nodded grimly. Jiwon sat back. She had jumped into a river to save a stranger. Now she was bound to that stranger by alien law. If Mirai failed to prove her worth, they would both die. If Mirai succeeded, Jiwon would be honored. It was a gamble, a huge, reckless gamble. But then again, her whole life had been a series of gambles. Why stop now? "Fine," Jiwon said. "I accept." She did not need telepathy to feel the shock ripple through the crowd. The old leader nodded slowly, then gestured to the tribe. The council was over. As the aliens dispersed, Hyunwoo approached. He knelt beside his sister and embraced her briefly. Then he looked at Jiwon and placed his hand over his heart. "Thank you." Jiwon nodded. "Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do." Mirai looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Jiwon smiled. "Don't worry. Where I come from, we don't leave people behind. And we definitely don't feed them to giant crocodiles. We're going to figure this out together." Mirai did not understand all the words, but she understood the smile. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The first lesson Jiwon taught Mirai was how to make a proper knot. They sat outside Mirai's small dwelling, a simple dome of mud and reeds at the edge of the village. Jiwon had retrieved some supplies from her hidden camp the night before, including several meters of synthetic rope. Now she demonstrated a basic bowline knot, her fingers moving slowly so Mirai could follow. "This one is useful," Jiwon said, knowing Mirai could not fully understand but talking anyway. "It won't slip, it won't jam, and it's easy to untie even after it's been under tension." Mirai watched carefully. Her fingers were longer than Jiwon's, more delicate, but she mimicked the movements with surprising accuracy. Loop, through, around, and back. She pulled it tight and held up the finished knot. Jiwon smiled. "Perfect. First try. You're a natural." Over the past 3 days, they had developed a basic system of communication. Gestures, expressions, simple drawings in the dirt. It was crude and frustrating, but it worked. Mirai was clever. She picked up patterns quickly, and more importantly, she was motivated. Her life depended on proving her usefulness. Hyunwoo approached from the village center. He carried a clay pot filled with water and something that looked like dried fruit. He set it down between them and gestured for them to eat. Then he sat beside his sister, watching the lesson with interest. Jiwon showed them both how to tie several more knots, a square knot for joining ropes, a clove hitch for securing to a post, a trucker's hitch for creating mechanical advantage. She could see the gears turning in their minds as they realized the applications. Better traps, stronger shelters, more efficient tools. But it was not enough, not nearly enough. That evening, Elder Daishim summoned them again to the council circle. This time, the mood was different, less hostile, but no less serious. The old leader sat with several other elders, all watching Jiwon and Mirai with calculating eyes. Daishim spoke. His mouth moved with those soft, sibilant sounds. Mirai concentrated, her face tight with effort. She could catch fragments of the telepathic communication, brief flashes of meaning, but not the full message. Hyunwoo helped translate. He had been practicing with Jiwon too, learning some of her gestures and expressions. Between the 3 of them, they could manage a halting conversation. "He asks," Hyunwoo gestured carefully, "how humans survive. If you keep weak ones, who protects them? Who feeds them? Does tribe not suffer?" Jiwon had been thinking about this question for days. She knew it was coming. It was the fundamental difference between human culture and the Velnari way. "We protect each other," Jiwon said. She pointed at Hyunwoo, then at Mirai, then at herself. "Strong today, weak tomorrow. Everyone needs help sometimes. Everyone has something to give, even if it's not obvious." Hyunwoo struggled to convey this concept to the elders. Jiwon could see the confusion on their faces. In their worldview, the collective was everything. The psychic network was their strength. Those who could not contribute to it were dead weight. One of the other elders spoke. She was female, shorter than Daishim, but with even more elaborate markings. Her name, Jiwon had learned, was Yunji. She was the tribe's healer and second in authority. Hyunwoo translated her question. What if someone cannot fight, cannot hunt, cannot build? What use are they? Jiwon smiled. Let me tell you about my grandmother. Over the next 20 minutes, Jiwon told them about her Halmioni, how she had been a brilliant mathematician but had lost the use of her legs in an accident, how she could not walk, could not do physical labor, could not contribute in the traditional ways. But she had taught at a university. She had mentored hundreds of students. She had solved problems that helped design better spacecraft, safer buildings, more efficient systems. She could not hunt, Jiwon said, but she fed minds instead of bodies. She gave knowledge. That was her strength. The elders listened. Jiwon could not tell if they understood, but at least they were listening. Daeshim spoke again. Hyunwoo translated. But Mirai has no knowledge to give. She cannot join the mindshare. She cannot teach through thought. What can she offer? Jiwon looked at Mirai. The young woman sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small and fragile. But Jiwon had seen the focus in her eyes when learning the knots, the quick intelligence, the determination. She can learn, Jiwon said, and I can teach her. Give us time. How much time? Hyunwoo translated for Daeshim. 1 season, Jiwon said. It was a gamble. 3 months to turn a girl deemed useless into someone valuable. But Jiwon had done harder things. Probably. Daeshim considered this. He spoke with the other elders, their telepathic conversation invisible to Jiwon. Finally, he nodded. 1 season, Hyunwoo translated. If Mirai proves useful, you both live. If not, he did not finish the sentence. Jiwon nodded. Understood. That night, Jiwon lay in Mirai's dwelling, staring up at the curved ceiling. Mirai slept on the other side of the small space, her breathing soft and steady. Outside, the jungle sang with night sounds, strange calls and rustles that were slowly becoming familiar. Jiwon had really done it now. She had tied her fate to a stranger, violated every protocol. Her superiors would be furious when they found out, if they found out. She had missed 3 check-in calls already, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mirai standing in that river. Waiting to die because her brain was wired differently, because she could not do what the others could do. Jiwon had grown up with a cousin who was deaf, a brilliant artist who saw the world in colors and shapes that others missed. The family had adapted. They had learned sign language. They had made space for difference. These aliens could learn too. They had to. The next day, the real work began. Jiwon started with observation. She took Mirai into the jungle and taught her to track, to read broken branches and disturbed soil, to notice the patterns that animals left behind. Mirai struggled at first, missing obvious signs, but slowly, carefully, she improved. After a week, Jiwon noticed something interesting. Mirai would sometimes stop and tilt her head as if listening. Then she would point in a direction and indicate an animal was near. She was right more often than chance would allow. Can you sense them? Jiwon asked, pointing at Mirai's head, then at a nearby tree where a small creature was hiding. Mirai nodded slowly. She made a weak gesture. Little bit, not clear, like shadow. Her weak telepathy could not reach other Velnari minds strongly, but it could sense the simpler emotions of animals. Fear, aggression, contentment. It was not mind reading. It was more like emotional echolocation. Jiwon grinned. That's amazing. That's actually useful. Mirai looked surprised, then hopeful. They refined the skill. Jiwon taught Mirai to trust her instincts, to notice when prey was calm or alert, when predators were hunting or resting. Combined with the tracking skills, it made Mirai better at locating game than many of the tribe's hunters. Hyunwoo joined them sometimes. He was fascinated by Jiwon's knowledge. She taught them both about leverage, about physics, about strategy. She showed them how to build better traps using spring tension and trigger mechanisms, how to preserve meat using salt and smoke, how to filter water using layers of sand and charcoal. The tribe noticed. At first, they were skeptical, the strange outsider and the defective girl playing in the jungle. But when Mirai led Hyunwoo to a nest of protein-rich eggs that no one else had found, they paid attention. When the new trap design caught twice as many fish, they paid attention. When Mirai warned that a predator was stalking the foraging group and turned out to be right, they really paid attention. Slowly, grudgingly, the tribe's attitude began to shift. But not everyone was convinced. Some of the older hunters viewed Jiwon's teachings as an insult to tradition. Some of the young warriors saw Mirai's new skills as tricks, not true value. And Elder Daesham watched it all with cautious, calculating eyes. The season was passing, 2 months gone, 1 month left. Jiwon knew they needed something more, something undeniable. Mirai was improving, but she needed to prove herself in a way the tribe could not ignore. She just did not know what that would be. Not yet. One evening, as they sat by a small fire outside Mirai's dwelling, the young woman spoke. Her voice was soft and uncertain, unused to speech. Jiwon. It was the first word she had spoken aloud in weeks. Thank you. The words were in Velnari, but Jiwon understood. She had been learning their spoken language just as they had been learning her gestures. You're welcome, Jiwon said in the same language. Her accent was terrible, but Mirai smiled anyway. Why? Mirai asked. Why save me? You did not know me. Jiwon looked up at the stars. 2 moons hung in the sky, larger and closer than Earth's moon. The constellations were all wrong. She was far from home. Because it was the right thing to do, Jiwon said, and because everyone deserves a chance, even if they're different, especially if they're different. Mirai was quiet for a long moment. Your people, they are strange. Jiwon laughed. Yeah, we are, but that's not always a bad thing. Above them, the jungle canopy rustled. The twin moons cast silver light through the leaves, and somewhere in the darkness, something was moving. Something large. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Jiwon and Mirai sat by their fire, teacher and student, human and alien. 2 outsiders finding their place in a world that had not wanted them. And that, Jiwon thought, was enough for now. The first warning came from the scouts at dawn. Jiwon was teaching Mirai how to start a fire using friction when Hyunwoo came running through the village. His face was pale, his eyes wide. Behind him, 2 other scouts followed, both breathing hard. The entire tribe emerged from their dwellings. Elder Daesham and Yeonji moved to the center of the village. The scouts knelt before them, speaking rapidly through both voice and telepathic projection. Jiwon could not hear the mind speech, but she saw the reaction ripple through the crowd. Fear. Pure, primal fear. What is it? Jiwon asked Hyunwoo. He turned to her, his hands shaking. Skirth! A migration! Coming this way! Jiwon had heard of Skirth from the tribal stories. Insectoid creatures that moved in massive swarms, stripping everything in their path. Plants, animals, anything organic. They came once every several years, following some instinct that no one understood. How many? Jiwon asked. Hyunwoo made a gesture like throwing sand into the wind. Countless. More than any swarm in memory. The scouts say the jungle is black with them. They will be here in 2 days. The tribe erupted into panicked discussion. Elders shouted through telepathy while younger members ran to gather supplies. Children cried. The air itself felt charged with terror. Daesham raised his hands. The crowd fell silent. He spoke. And Hyunwoo translated quietly for Jiwon. We will use the old defense, the mental barrier. All minds join together to create a field of confusion. The Skirth cannot tolerate it. They will turn away. But Yeonji shook her head. She spoke, her expression grave. Hyunwoo translated again. She says the swarm is too large. Our collective mind is strong, but not strong enough for so many skirth. The barrier will fail. Then we evacuate, someone else said. It was one of the senior hunters, a male named Taemin. We take what we can carry and flee north. Let the skirth have the village. The crowd murmured in distress. This village was generations old. It held their history, their ancestors' bones, their sacred places. To abandon it was to lose everything. Daishim spoke again, his mental voice heavy with resignation. They would prepare to evacuate. There was no other choice. Ji-won looked at Mirai. The young woman was staring at the ground, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was thinking. Hard. Mirai? Ji-won touched her shoulder. Mirai looked up. She gestured urgently, trying to communicate something. She pointed at her head, then made a weak gesture. Then she pointed at the jungle and made a crawling motion with her fingers. She drew in the dirt, sketching crude shapes. Ji-won frowned. I don't understand. Slow down. Mirai took a breath. She drew again, circles with lines radiating out, trails, paths. She pointed at her nose and made a sniffing gesture. Smell, Ji-won guessed. The skirth follow a scent? Mirai nodded vigorously. She made the weak gesture again, pointing at her head. Because her telepathy was weak, she could sense things the others could not. Subtle things, chemical things. Ji-won's mind raced. You can sense the pheromone trails? The chemical markers the scouts leave? Mirai nodded. Ji-won stood up. Hyunwoo, come here. He hurried over. Ji-won explained what Mirai was trying to say. Hyunwoo's eyes widened. He turned to his sister and asked her something in rapid Velnari. She answered, gesturing at the jungle, at specific directions. She says the trails are everywhere, Hyunwoo translated. The scouts mark paths for the swarm to follow. They smell sweet, like rotting fruit. She has been sensing them for days but did not understand what they were. Ji-won's heart began to pound. If the swarm follows the trails, we can disrupt them. Confuse the signals, break the swarm into smaller groups. How? Hyunwoo asked. Ji-won thought fast. Fire, smoke, and chemicals. I have some supplies at my camp. Concentrated acids, bases, strong-smelling compounds. If we burn them along with green wood and wet vegetation, we can create smoke that will overwhelm the pheromone trails. The swarm will fragment, lose cohesion. But the barrier, Hyunwoo said. We will still need the mental defense. Yes, Ji-won agreed. But if the swarm is broken into smaller groups, the barrier doesn't need to be as strong. The tribe can focus their telepathic power on targeted strikes instead of one massive shield. Hyunwoo stared at her. That is not how it is done. The old way is going to fail, Ji-won said. You said so yourself. The swarm is too big, but this might work. Hyunwoo looked at his sister. Mirai met his gaze and nodded. She believed in the plan. I will speak to Daishim, Hyunwoo said. The council meeting that followed was tense. Daishim was skeptical. The old method had worked for generations. To change it now, to trust the outsider's strange knowledge and the defective girl's weak senses, was a risk. But Yoonji supported the idea. She had seen Mirai's improvements over the past weeks. She had seen the human's knowledge prove useful again and again. And most importantly, she understood that the old method would fail against a swarm this size. What do we have to lose? Yoonji argued. If we evacuate, we lose everything. If we stand and fight the traditional way, we die. At least this gives us a chance. Other elders agreed. The younger warriors, including Taemin, were eager to fight rather than run, and Hyunwoo's voice carried weight. He was respected, skilled. When he vouched for the plan, others listened. Finally, Daishim nodded. They would try the human strategy. The next day was a blur of activity. Jiwon made the dangerous trip back to her camp, loading a pack with every chemical compound she could carry. Concentrated sodium hydroxide, sulfuric acid, ammonia, phosphorus, things that would burn hot and produce choking, acrid smoke. Mireille led a group through the jungle, marking the pheromone trails. She moved with confidence now, trusting her weak telepathic sense. She could feel the chemical signatures like ghosts at the edge of her perception. The tribe watched with grudging respect as she pointed out trail after trail that their scouts had missed. Hyunwoo organized the warriors. They cut green wood and gathered wet moss and leaves. They prepared fire positions in a ring around the village, each one stocked with materials ready to burn. By nightfall, everything was ready. Jiwon stood with Mirai at the edge of the village, looking out at the jungle. The night was too quiet. The usual chorus of insects and animals was gone. They had fled ahead of the swarm. "Are you scared?" Jiwon asked. Mirai nodded. "Yes, but also—" She struggled for the word in her limited vocabulary. "Ready?" Jiwon smiled. "Good. Fear is fine. It keeps you sharp. Just don't let it stop you." The skirth arrived with the dawn. The sound came first, a rustling, clicking, chittering noise that grew louder and louder. Then the smell, sharp and acrid, like vinegar mixed with rotting meat. Then the sight. The jungle turned black. Thousands upon thousands of skirth poured through the trees. They were the size of large dogs, with 6 legs and armored carapaces that gleamed iridescent in the early light. Their mandibles clacked, their antennae waved. They moved as one organism, a living flood that consumed everything in its path. "Light the fires!" Daishim's mental command rippled through the tribe. Warriors ran to each fire position. They struck sparks, nursed flames, fed the pyres with green wood and wet vegetation. Jiwon moved from fire to fire, carefully adding her chemicals. The flames turned strange colors, green, blue, purple. The smoke billowed thick and black and reeking. The wind carried the smoke into the jungle, directly into the path of the swarm. The effect was immediate. The skirth at the front of the swarm stopped. Their antennae waved frantically. They clicked and chittered in confusion. Behind them, more skirth crashed into the stopped group. The organized flow broke apart. "It's working!" Hyunwoo shouted. The swarm began to split. Groups of skirth veered left and right, searching for the pheromone trails that were no longer detectable through the smoke. The massive force fragmented into dozens of smaller groups. "Now!" Daishim commanded. "Focus the barrier!" The tribe joined minds. Jiwon could not see it, but she could feel it. A pressure in the air, a vibration in her bones. The telepathic collective focused their power, creating zones of mental static around each fragmented group of skirth. The insects recoiled from the barriers. They turned, fled, crashed into each other. Some groups bypassed the village entirely. Others milled in confused circles, but some pushed through. A group of skirth broke through on the eastern side. They surged toward the village, their mandibles clicking hungrily. Warriors met them with spears and fire. The insects were tough, their carapaces hard to pierce, but the Velnari were desperate and skilled. Jiwon drew her sidearm and fired. The plasma bolts burned through skirth like paper. She dropped 6, 8, 10, but more kept coming. Mirai stood beside her, not fighting, but sensing. She called out warnings, pointing out groups that were trying to flank. Her weak telepathy could detect their simple insect emotions: hunger, aggression, intent. The battle raged for 2 hours. Smoke filled the air. The sounds of combat mixed with the chittering of insects. Warriors fell, dwellings burned, but the tribe held. Slowly, the skirth groups were driven back. The fragmentation had worked. No single group was large enough to overwhelm the defenders. and the mental barriers kept them confused and disorganized. By mid-morning, the swarm was gone. The survivors continued north, bypassing the village entirely. The tribe stood among the wreckage, exhausted but alive. Several warriors were injured. 2 dwellings were destroyed. But they had won. Daishim walked through the village, assessing the damage. He stopped in front of Jiwon and Mirai. Both were covered in soot and blood, breathing hard. The old elder looked at Mirai for a long moment. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was simple, but profound. Acceptance. Hyunwoo embraced his sister. Around them, other tribe members approached. They touched Mirai's arm, her shoulder. Some even smiled. Yoonji approached Jiwon. The healer's face was streaked with ash, but her eyes were warm. She spoke, and Hyunwoo translated. "She says you have proven your worth. Both of you. The tribe owes you a debt." Jiwon nodded, too tired to speak. That night, as the tribe worked to rebuild, Mirai sat beside the river. The same river where she had almost died months ago. Jiwon found her there. "You did good today," Jiwon said. Mirai smiled. "We did good. Together." "Yeah," Jiwon agreed. "Together." The season was not over yet, but Jiwon knew they had passed the real test. 3 days after the Skirth attack, Elder Daishim called for a formal council. Not just the elders this time, but the entire tribe. Every adult member gathered in the great circle as the twin suns set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Jiwon sat with Mirai and Hyunwoo near the edge of the circle. She had learned enough of the Velnari language now to follow basic conversations, though the telepathic discussions still happened beyond her perception. She watched the faces around her instead, reading emotions the old-fashioned way. Daishim stood in the center, his blue markings seeming to glow in the fading light. He looked older than he had months ago. Tired. But there was something else in his expression. Doubt, maybe even regret. He began to speak using both voice and telepathy so that even Jiwon could follow most of his words. "For 70 cycles, I have served this tribe as elder. For 70 cycles, I have upheld the old laws, the laws that kept us strong, the laws that kept us alive." He paused, looking around the circle. "The judgment of teeth is one of our oldest laws. Those who cannot contribute to the collective mind cannot remain with the tribe. This has always been our way." The gathered Velnari listened in silence. Some nodded. Others looked uncertain. "But 3 days ago," Daishim continued, "we faced a threat greater than any in memory. A Skirth swarm that should have destroyed us. And we survived." He turned to look at Mirai. "We survived because of the one I judged. The one I sent to the Kreshmar. The one whose life was saved by an outsider." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Mirai's weakness in the collective mind is real," Daishim said. "She cannot join our thoughts. She cannot share our mental strength. By the old laws, she is useless." He paused. "But she sensed the pheromone trails. She guided us to them. Her different way of perceiving the world saved us all." Yoonji stood. "I have treated the wounded from the Skirth battle. 12 injured, but none killed. In past swarms of half that size, we lost dozens. The humans' knowledge and Mirai's senses changed everything." Taemin, the senior hunter, stood next. "The new trap designs bring in twice as much food. The water filtration saves time and prevents sickness. The knot techniques make our shelters stronger." He looked at Ji-won. "The outsider has given us much, but she did this through Mirai, through teaching, through sharing." More tribe members stood to speak. A young mother talked about how Mirai had warned her when a predator was stalking near her child. An elderly craftsman demonstrated a new tool design inspired by Jiwon's teachings. A scout described how Mirai's emotional sensing had helped him avoid a hostile animal. Through it all, Daishim listened. His face remained impassive, but Jiwon could see the weight settling on his shoulders. The weight of 7 decades of judgments. How many Mirais had he sent to the Kreshmar? How many different perspectives, different gifts, different possibilities had been lost? When the testimonies ended, silence fell over the circle. Daishim looked at Mirai. "Stand, child." Mirai stood, her legs shaking slightly. Jiwon wanted to stand with her to offer support, but this moment belonged to Mirai alone. "You were weak," Daishim said. "By our laws, by our traditions, you had no value. I believed this. I enforced this." He paused. "I was wrong." The collective gasp that went through the tribe was audible even to Jiwon. An elder admitting fault, questioning the old ways. It was unprecedented. "Strength takes many forms," Daishim said. "The collective mind is one form, but it is not the only form. We have been blind to this truth for too long." He turned to address the full circle. "I propose we end the judgment of teeth." The tribe erupted, some in approval, others in shock, still others in anger. Voices rose, both spoken and telepathic. The debate raged for nearly an hour. A conservative elder named Borum stood. "If we keep the weak, we will grow weaker ourselves. Resources are limited. The collective must be strong." Hyunwoo rose to answer. "Mirai was weak in one way, but strong in another. We almost threw that strength away. How many others have we discarded who might have saved us in different ways?" A young warrior named Sohee spoke. "But how do we judge worth if not by contribution to the collective? What standard do we use?" Jiwon had been silent throughout the debate, knowing this decision had to be theirs. But now she stood. All eyes turned to her. "On my world," Jiwon said slowly in careful Velnari, "we have a saying. Judge someone not by where they start, but by how far they travel. Mirai started with less than others, but look how far she has come. Look what she has achieved." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We do not throw away our different ones. We learn from them. They see things we do not see. They think in ways we do not think. This makes us all stronger, not weaker." Yoonji nodded. "The human speaks truth. Diversity of thought is its own strength." The debate continued, but the tide had turned. More and more tribe members spoke in favor of change. Even some of the conservative elders began to waver. Finally, as the last sun dipped below the horizon and the moons rose, Daishim called for silence. "We will vote," he said, "not as a collective mind, but as individuals. Each person will speak their choice aloud, so all can hear, so all can be accountable." One by one, tribe members stood and spoke. Some voted to keep the old ways, but more voted for change. Slowly, steadily, the count grew. When the final vote was tallied, the result was clear. The judgment of teeth would be suspended. A new system would be created, one that judged contribution in all its forms, not just psychic strength. Daishim nodded slowly. "It is decided. The old law is ended. We will create a new trial, one that honors all forms of strength." He walked to Mirai and placed both hands on her shoulders. "You have proven your worth 100 times over. You are not weak. You are different, and that difference has value." Mirai's eyes filled with tears. She had lived her whole life being told she was broken, useless, a burden. And now, in front of the entire tribe, the eldest leader was telling her she had worth. She could not speak. She simply nodded. The council ended. The tribe dispersed, some celebrating, others still uncertain, all processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Jiwon found herself standing alone by the river, the same river where this had all started. She stared at the dark water, thinking about everything that had changed. Footsteps approached. She turned to see Mirai and Hyunwoo. "Thank you," Mirai said. Her spoken Velnari was still soft, but it was confident now. You gave me life. Twice. Once from the Kreshmar. Once from the law. You saved yourself, Jiwan said. I just gave you a chance. You did the rest. Hyunwoo stepped forward. What will you do now? Your mission, your people. They must be wondering where you are. Jiwan laughed. Yeah, they're probably furious. I've missed about 24 check-ins. They might think I'm dead. Will you leave? Mirai asked. There was fear in her voice. Jiwan considered. She should leave. Her mission was observation, not intervention. She had broken every rule, violated every protocol. She should go back to her ship, file her reports, and face the consequences. But when she looked at Mirai, when she looked at this tribe that was taking its first uncertain steps toward something new, she could not imagine leaving. Not yet. I'll stay a while longer, Jiwan said. There's more to teach, more to learn. And besides, she smiled, I want to see what you do with your new freedom. Mirai smiled back. Will you teach me more? About your world? About humans? Of course, and you can teach me about yours. Fair trade. Yanwu looked up at the stars. Your people, the humans. Are there many of you out there? Billions, Jiwan said, on hundreds of worlds. We travel far. We explore. We meet new species. She paused. Some of them are friendly. Some aren't. But we keep trying. We keep reaching out. Why? Yanwu asked. It must be dangerous. Costly. Jiwan thought about her answer. Because the universe is big and strange and full of wonders. And because we believe that understanding each other, learning from each other, makes everyone better. Stronger. She looked at Mirai. Kind of like what you're learning now. They stood together by the river, the three of them, as the moons rose higher. The jungle sang its night songs. The village behind them hummed with quiet conversation. A world was changing, slowly but surely. In the distance, Jiwan's emergency beacon blinked on her abandoned camp. Her ship's AI would be sending increasingly worried messages. Her superiors would be filing reports. There would be consequences, investigations, maybe even charges. But Jiwan found she did not care much. She had done what was right. She had saved a life, changed a culture, made friends across the stars. If that was worth losing her commission, so be it. Mirai touched Jiwan's arm. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Jiwan said, that sometimes the rules need to be broken, and sometimes the weak are actually the strongest of all. They just need someone to see it. Like you saw me, Mirai said. Like I saw you, Jiwan agreed. Hyunwoo smiled. The tribe has a new saying now. The warriors are sharing it through the collective mind. Measure strength by distance traveled, not by where the journey begins. Jiwan laughed. That's pretty good. You should keep it. We will, Hyunwoo said, along with many other things you have taught us. They sat down by the river's edge, the three of them, and talked long into the night. About worlds and cultures and differences, about strength and weakness and everything in between, about the future that was opening up before them, strange and uncertain and full of possibility. And in the village behind them, Elder Daishim stood alone in the council circle. He looked at the stars and thought about the human who had fallen from them, the human who had jumped into a river, onto the back of a sacred beast, and changed everything. He had been wrong. The old ways were not always the right ways. Change was not always weakness. And sometimes the gods sent you exactly what you needed, even if you did not know you needed it. Daishim smiled. For the first time in many cycles, he felt hopeful about the future. The tribe would adapt. They would grow. They would learn. And maybe, just maybe, they would be better for it. In the river, something splashed. A fish jumping, or perhaps something larger. The water rippled and settled, reflecting the twin moons above. The sacred river that had once been a place of judgment was now just a river. a place where water flowed and life continued. And that, Daisham thought, was exactly as it should be.